So, hello everyone. Welcome to this live stream. We do this every Thursday. I'm Alan Pope, and these are my colleagues in the Anchore open source team. We've got a full house today, I think, which is often the case, but sometimes people are busy. So I'll just apologise first of all if the screen that you're seeing
Hello, everyone.
is
Welcome to this
live stream. Mute that. If you're seeing it a bit blurry, apologies. It's my fault. I don't know what's going on. I'd like to blame OBS, but it's my own incompetence. So what we do on these streams is we go through some issues, pull requests, discussions, and it'll all become clear as we go through. Any questions from you lot before I try and muddle through this nonsense?
Nope.
If someone in the chat could let me know if this is working or if one of you wants to spin up the stream, I can see it, but I don't, and I assume it's working.
Yeah, it's working.
Yeah, it's just a bit blurry. I apologise for that. Don't ask. So, as I said, these are the wonderful people who work on a whole bunch of open source code for Anchore, including Syft and Grype, our super popular SBOM generator and vulnerability scanner. You'll find all the source code over on GitHub. If you just go to github.com/Anchore. And you'll also find we've got a discourse. Thank you, Joshua, in the chat for telling me you can hear me. We've also got a discourse. If you go to anchor.com/discourse, you'll get taken there. And every time we do this live stream, I pop open a new chat. And there's a bunch of links here for stuff we need to talk about. Has anyone got anything important they want to do before I dive into the issues, pull requests, and other topics?
Send it.
I just want to see what happens. Okay, well, let's go.
Jump in.
I did add an extra link. Sorry if this is a dupe. It's not coming up in chat. Oh, it is. It's just there's a bit of a delay. Sorry, Joshua. Yeah, it will appear momentarily. We're about, I don't know, a minute or two behind, maybe. So I've got 3 links here for us to go to. I'll just pop them all open. I've changed this one after feedback from the last time we did this. I've filtered posts on Discourse to show only those that have got a maximum of 2 replies across these categories that are still open, and so you can fiddle with the filters on here, and it's quite funky. So yeah, we can revisit that in a moment, but we'll start with the issues. So has anyone got one they want to talk about? Anything? We also will answer questions from the chat. But if anyone's got one they want to start with, that'd be awesome.
Yep. I in our chat for our call, I put the pull request and the related issue with the comment for it, and I wanted to get the teams
23.
Yes. So this is a low number PR because it's a library that we forked and doesn't get too much development. But this is a pull request by a community member. Thank you so much for sending this one up. And then there's a comment that I linked in the chat. So first off, Joshua, thank you for setting this up and the huge discussion that you put in before making the PR. I wanted to open to the team for our package URL encoding for our Syft SBOMs. We currently don't encode forward slashes. Yep, forward slashes correctly in the name. That's what's being contended. We forked this library, and one of our default kind of changes to it was when the name segment for the PURL gets put into the final total string, we would choose to not URL encode forward slashes. And I couldn't figure out why we chose to do that, so I wanted to open up to the floor. Does anyone remember why we did that? Do we have any downstream reasons why that exists? Are we not showing the right issue? Yeah, Alan, the issue's at the very top of the stream. Sorry.
Oh, this is not the right one. 23.
That's the correct one.
That's
Sorry,
the one you want, right?
Yeah, you were opening other ones as well.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Nope, that's okay. So this is the one that we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
So again, we are not URL encoding the name segment. Is there a reason we're not doing that? If it's incorrect, we'll just take this PR as is and get the fix merged upstream.
Yeah, uh, uh, there is some history behind this, but I think the TLDR is I'm not confident in the previous conclusions made, or some of it was from an external PR, and then another part of it was from merging um, from upstream, like the change, like trying to sync up the fork. So I'm looking at the PR now, and it seems well reasoned. Like I actually, so that a couple of the tests that were changed seem much better, much more reasonable than what's there now. So also, what's done upstream is the URL query escape, um, and with the replace all trick. So I mean, I think taking that just makes sense.
Do we have
But
any
yeah,
other unique changes to this? I've tried to find any other ones that were different, but that's in the
this is the biggest one.
yeah, the AB/C to AB%2FC like encoding that we don't do that the upstream library does if there's a forward slash in the name segment seems to be the largest difference. So is there a world where we just go back to relying on package URL and sunset this fork, or what are the other reasons we have to keep this fork around?
Oh, the fork is like still like 40 commits ahead, and so it's
Oh, I didn't see that
yeah.
part.
Sorry,
Sorry.
so keeping the fork is still worthwhile, but using, well, sorry, what I'm trying to say is they are also doing what is done on 508 here, which is the URL query escape, and then the replace plus with %20. I'm pretty certain, um, and I believe we should also do that as well. But yeah, the fork still has changes that um, that I think we need. Like it
Okay.
ends up being that there's not a lot of, like, trying to get PRs in upstream ends up being much slower. But I do agree with this correction. Like this PR, I think is correct.
Josh was
Awesome.
also raising a comment. There were other things that weren't being encoded correctly, like the chevrons.
Yeah, that was what was meant initially to like this PR was meant to solve. It was the chevrons. And then
Right.
when that was done, it surfaced the fact that we had a failing test case that was unique to this repo that caused the forward slash to fail. So I was very confident to just agree with him, like, yes, we want to get the chevron encoding correct. But then I saw that we had this extra test case that was unique to our library, and I wanted to get everyone's kind of like, hey, can we remove this test case and just utilize upstream's behavior for this? If so, thumbs up. Like, and I wanted to get all of our minds to shake on this because there might be either some downstream considerations for Anchor Enterprise and the way they treat namesake segments, or this is a breaking change, right? If we're not URL encoding name segments correctly, and now we all of a sudden start doing this, people who rely on Syft might have matching behavior that is affected by us changing to URL encoding correctly. So
Yeah, I mean it's really a bug fix though.
yeah,
I agree. Like it's there's breaking behaviors, but it's bringing it. It's not that the spec changed and we're following a spec change that is breaking.
it's a
It
correction.
was
Yeah.
not following the spec to begin with, and we should have been following the spec.
Okay. Cool. Cool.
I have one question that about this is there anywhere that we are providing a name to the encoding that is something like group ID slash name, for example, like in Java or in JavaScript that's like org slash name? Because I think that there are like those things would actually be like group and slash name and not encoded. Like there would be an actual slash separating those segments. So that's my main question is like, how are we using it? And do we have like a separate spot for group everywhere? And if that's the case, then definitely encode name.
That's a good question. I guess I have to look at, well, I have to look at I will look at Node and Java specifically to see if the group gets segmented out into the namespace, or if the namespace is empty and then the name is just group name. I would still, there's a Josh's comment on the PR. So Keith, even if we were to put group slash name and the namespace is blank for the name segment, isn't his comment where he says, I have to link it. I'll link this one in our call so that Alan is able to bring it up on the screen. It's the most recent link, Alan.
Got it. Thanks.
Right. So this comment that says
From you
namespace
yesterday.
empty, apply type-specific normalization to the name if needed. Append percent encoded name to the PRL. So even if we're taking that group/name and we're putting it in the name segment, the spec still argues that we should append a percent encoded name, which is that, into the PRL. So like, irrespective of if we're doing any kind of logic to separate that ourselves and figure out what's the namespace and what's not, if we determine that that's the name, we should always be percent encoding that.
Yeah, and I think that makes the namespace and name separable too. Otherwise, they're technically not today,
Right.
or not easily, I should say.
Yeah,
Like
definitely agree. Yeah.
It's a separate bug that we're not splitting that and putting it in the namespace or putting it in, or it's not a bug. It's an application to the spec of Node and Maven respectively that those things themselves are considered, quote, a name in those ecosystems. So we should still always be percent encoding them when they're in a PRL name segment.
Yes, I agree with everything that's been said. Just to be clear.
Okay. If there are no red flags, if this is a good change, then I'll take this forward to the end. And there's some, if you have separate reading, there's some yak shaving comments about tests that are failing in all the repos. I'll figure out a way to get rid of those. It's, if you're interested, how to deal with specific PURL types and the tests that like guarantee that those types are being operated on correctly, not the spec itself, but the very like nuanced, I've added this new PRL type called CPAN, and I think CPAN should be treated this specific way. I tried to do it in the Python library as well, and they weren't treating it correctly. So, and even upstream isn't treating it correctly for the test data. When I say upstream, I mean not just package URL go, but the actual test cases for the package URL spec are not doing these nuances correctly. So, yeah, I'll make those edits too. So we get a green CI.
Thanks.
All right.
Sweet. So I messed up and showed too many things earlier. Which was the next one you wanted to go to? Were they the other ones that you linked to, or are these?
Yep. So there's two that have to do with package URL go, and then there's two Syft issues. One is an issue comment, and the other is the actual issue itself, which is 2.5. Well, there's an issue comment and there's an issue 3591 and 3324.
That one.
Yep. Okay, so
that
there's not that one. Yep.
That
So
one,
there's this,
yep.
and then there's the other one, which is Go binaries that currently, which is you're the tab right next to this one on your Chrome.
Oh, okay. Sweet. Where do you want to start?
Let's start with this one, because they both have to do with Go versions.
Cool.
Yeah, I can start here. We talked about this one offline a little bit. But currently the Go compiler doesn't encode the version of the main module that is the thing actually being built. So if we find an executable that was compiled by Go, all the versions are there of all the dependencies except the actual thing that being built. And there are a couple of strategies to try to get it out of the binary. One of them, we could look at the linker flags where somebody you can like set the value of a constant at build time. So if there's like a constant called version and then name and the value is set by flags past the compiler build time, those flags are preserved in the binary. And so we can say like, oh, somebody set version equals 1.2.3 in the go build command. That's probably the version of the thing they're building. But the fallback position in Syft was we put the string parentheses devel parentheses because I don't remember the historical reasons for that. But the what we think we should do is if we're reaching that far down in the if statement, all our ways of trying to guess the version of the thing being built are wrong. So we're going to return unknown instead. And then we have other code in Syft that handles packages where we know a name and not a version, and that'll pick it up. So we think that's probably the right thing to do there. I think that I think the Go toolchain puts the string devel as the version is why we do that.
Yep.
But that's not super useful in an SBOM because it doesn't tell you anything, and it confuses downstream vulnerability checkers and things. So otherwise craft a main module from the path, right? We couldn't figure it out. We got all the way to all our ways of guessing right out. It's going to get better in Go 1.24, which will encode a main module. The reason for the difference is that Go versions are version control tags, and the thing you're actually building is just files you already have, and you didn't fetch it at a version control tag, like a git tag, so it wasn't historically in there. But anyway, so I think this one is probably discussed. But there was another one that I hadn't looked at yet.
There was one aspect to that we talked about, that like there are some cases where the binary cataloger might do better than the Go cataloger. Did we want to like double click on that at all, or I don't really care either way, but.
I think. I mean, we could mention it. Is the known unknowns fallback going to help there, or is that, or would we need? So there's possibly an additional feature request where, like, instead of returning unknown, we would first try to let the binary classifier try to regex the package name and version out of the binary, or try to merge them. Maybe I don't know, maybe there's like a post-processing step that could be added.
That's a really good question. If like would a package with no version be able to be merged with a package with a version? Does that happen today, or is that something that would happen after the dropping rules happen and we wouldn't have that?
Today, the merge rules do not consider the version field at all. Though this is a good point. Like, because we've added the package compliance policy, it probably should consider that. And if it sees like something unbalanced for something it's trying to merge, something with a version, something that says it has a non-empty string, it says unknown, we should treat it as if that's not the one we should prefer. And actually, I think today it would refuse to merge them because they have different IDs. And so I think we've actually just uncovered a bug. Today they would have different IDs. So the merge code says, I will not merge you. So, yep, cool.
So maybe there's
an issue.
So the follow-up issue is to make sure that one of the Go cataloger and the binary classifier cataloger both find a binary that the package is merged appropriately, because there's really just one package. Is that the ask?
And prefer the one with the version.
Yeah, exactly. Or at least like take the version from the one that has the version, or however.
Yeah.
Right. The merging logic does not consider like the package compliance rules, like the values that you might see there. I guess it doesn't need to consider the rules itself. It just needs to know that this special value that says unknown is a stub and can be overridden. So.
Okay.
I could write that issue.
Nice one.
So we discussed the other Go version issue.
Yep. Okay. So this one, I like moving all. Yep. Good conclusion. Moving everything to unknown, and then getting the merge bug fixed. The other one is I looked all over the place, and there's different versions where some version strings for the Go standard lib uses the Go prefix, some don't. And I wanted to get like the general knowledge of the whole team together to be like, is there a correct way to do this right now, or are we just like split where the Go standard lib, like with our analysis, we return this Go prefix, and some vulnerability sources show Go as the prefix when considering it as a vulnerability, and some don't.
So is this? Do you know what the output from this actually is? Like what command or what artifact was
Oh,
this
yeah.
was run on?
Yeah, let me pull that part up. It's easiest. I'll find it. I'll do some code splunking in Syft because I have it up and I was looking at it before this call. Your question is basically, when we find a version of the standard library, how do we extract the version from it? Like what is the command or metadata that's accessed to get the Go version?
No, I mean, so I'm just talking about the example on screen here. Like, does anybody know what was run to get this exact snippet?
No, I can ask him for that. I should have done that in the thread when I responded or when we first looked at it. But I had just assumed that it was, we found a Go package, and because the metadata showed the Go standard library at a certain version, we extracted that and created the Go standard library package like we normally do when building the bomb. But I can follow up with him.
Just as a FYI, we could scan Syft and we get standard lib with a Go prefix in the version.
Okay. And then not in the Perl, I presume.
Correct. Yep. Not in the Perl.
Interesting. I wonder. Oh, we actually might have some code when crafting the Perl to take off Go prefixes, which cool. So yeah, should we be consistent with those versions in other places? I mean, would we always want to remove the Go prefix?
I think for like that and for like V prefix things, like I would think we just want to always remove them and get left with whatever, closest thing to a semver we could get.
That's what I thought. But then if you click the Go vulnerability database that I just linked in our Zoom chat, like here's an example of a record. The Go versions in this like official record that's supplied by the upstream like Go vulndb uses the version Go prefix 1.22.7. So like when we're parsing and pulling these vulnerability records in this metadata, this is how the authors themselves refer to the version. So it's like not semver compliant, but it's also like you've taken an apple out of the metadata. Someone has an apple over here, and you're saying, "Let me convert that apple to an orange," and now I'm going to compare oranges back to apples because the authors of the source don't do that same kind of conversion. So it's like that's why I wanted to bring this up. Like, what is the answer, or what do we think is the answer?
I mean, the Syft philosophy tends to be like raise up the raw information you find and don't change it unless it makes sense. And like that last bit is very much weasel words, I get. But I mean, again, like the bias is don't change it. I'm kind of curious as to, I'd have to crack open like the Go cataloger to understand like what are we doing today in terms of Go packages. When does the V get dropped? When does Go get dropped? So I'll crack it open now. But I mean, if I look at the overall issue, it's really just asking for consistency, and I get that, and I agree with it. Do we know if the Perl spec is not allowing Go as a prefix within the version?
Actually, I was just glancing at the Perl spec for the other issue, and I think it just says that basically that version is an opaque percent encoded string.
Okay.
Like from the specs perspective. I go find a link for that, but I think it doesn't have an opinion on.
Yeah, so the fact that we're changing it for the Perl but not for anything else does not sound good. We should have done all one way or all the other way. So
This change though, the Go prefix strip. I'm looking at the blame on it. I really
Where is it?
I'm trying to go back in time. It's when we actually build the Go compiler package, we just do a strings trim prefix.
Well,
Go ahead. I feel like someone asked us to do this because of a matching concern. There's like a PRL matching concern, and then there's a version matching concern. And the reason that we're inconsistent is because people who have the Perl data structure, which we're matching on, don't have Go prefixed. And when we want to match on the version string itself, some sources have the version string prefix with Go. So we're inconsistent because of the diverging data sources that we're comparing against.
Yeah,
let's see if
like
there's special code for this in Grype. I dropped a link to the Perl spec, and the Perl spec indeed says that version is a plain and opaque string. So I don't care what you put.
I think the other thing that really plays into this is like what CPEs are we expecting to go see in the world. Do they also have Go embedded in the version field?
So we just do yeah, we just have a strings.trim prefix Go in Grype. So it's not very hard to handle on the matching side either way, presumably. But that's when we're constructing the Go version object. We just do a strings.trim prefix Go. The semver library, there's a comment that says the semver library we're using handles the V automatically. But I do feel like I see Go tooling print out the standard library with that. Like,
You muted. I don't know if that was intentional.
I was just pointing out like kind of the same thing as Will, is that we do have like a special Go version comparator that can do whatever it needs to do. So I think I'm kind of with Alex with one of his comments earlier, which is like Syft should raise the version that we're told, and then and that if that does include the Go, it should be that everywhere.
So if you do just Go version -m on a Go binary, which just asks the Go tooling what versions are in it, the version of Go has no package name or separate version. It just literally prints the string Go 1.23.4 with no spaces or anything.
Holy cow.
So, or whatever
Like
was
that.
used to compile that. Yeah, exactly. And so I think that's what we're surfacing, except we call it standard lib. This is kind of a troublesome package because it's really two packages, right? There's the Go compiler toolchain in CLI as part of this package, and then there's the Go runtime that gets statically linked into the binary. And we're really matching against the second part, but you often can't tell from vulnerability data from the machine readable parts which one is caring about. So it's kind of a weird package because it's like the version of the language is like embedded in the version of the language is embedded in the binary, and parts of the language are embedded in the binary. There's devel. You can see that's where we came up with devel. That's what.
Oh, that one. Right.
Well, yep. That'll be better in Go 124. But
I kind of see how this came about, because we're grabbing this. We kind of presumed we were wrong because we're grabbing this information about what the compiler is, and we're trying to describe the standard library without. And I bet you what didn't happen is we didn't go and look at the Go vuln database to see how it describes the standard lib, and well, it still keeps the Go prefix, and I think we just presume the compiler and the standard lib should be different in that way. They're not. It's a guess, but are we kind of like mischief managed? We should keep the Go prefix and move on, or do we say something else?
Yeah, I'm in the camp of keeping it, and I'm also going to add a needs investigation on this one because I want to go a bit further and see if we are consistent and keep it in both places. How does that affect our matching? And like because we explored, we said, oh, we have a custom matcher that handles this no matter which way. So why don't we just keep it as accurate as possible from both sources and call it a day?
Yeah.
If you get the full story, definitely capture it in either the issue. That'd be great. So
Okay, yeah, I'll write that up.
Cool. Thank you.
Nice. Right, were there any special requests? Because if not, I've got one. But I'm happy to wait for.
you're MC, you get to cut the line. Unless
Do I?
Keith, you had
Oh,
one.
excellent.
Sound like you're about to
Good.
say something. All right.
So the way this worked was I got a DM from someone who said, "Hey, any chance of a second look at this?" Oh, sorry, I'll pop it in the chat. Syft 2980.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's happening here is because this is what we're saying is it's a binary analysis, I believe. And if that's true, I believe. Let me back up. When we look at Go binaries, we start with what we find in the Go build info section. Oh wait, sorry, Keith, are you saying something different?
No, I mean, I think it's just the same thing as you're saying.
Gotcha. So yeah, we start with like looking at the Go build info section to see if there's anything declared there for main modules. That's never the case. So then we look at LD flags. We look for commonly provided LD flags. It's a bit of a regexing magic in and of itself, but that tends to be pretty accurate. But if there's nothing there, we craft a pseudo version, 0.0.0 dash, timestamp and get info. But if we don't have enough information there, then we actually just look for version-like things in the binary. It's one of my least favorite things of that cataloger because it's a guess, and it's an expensive guess. It takes a long time to run, and it's sometimes wrong. So sometimes it's right, and it's like a little magical, and so it's nice when it gets it right. But I don't like it because of issues like this, where it's just blatantly wrong. And I kind of want to remove it because of a lot of the false positives it causes. But I'm pretty certain that's where this 345.1 is coming from. Is because there is somewhere in the binary something that says 3.45.1, and we just caught on to it. So with a regex, a very permissive regex.
This is one that, in theory could be fixed with a custom binary classifier thing, and excluding the wrong thing from the Go side.
It will also be fixed if the underlying binary is rebuilt with Go 124, assuming like Syft makes the correct change, which we should. Maybe that would be a good time is like we drop regexing the whole binary and start doing the parsing the version out of wherever Go 124 is going to put it. And then this would probably get devel under the current change or unknown. So
I mean, yeah. So like one thing so one thing here is, when do we drop, or do we drop, and if so, when do we drop the regex approach that we're doing now? The other thing is that to double click on is what Keith mentioned, which is, well, we can add a binary classifier that would just make this better. And I'm mixed on it, because like the binary cataloger was kind of meant to solve like how do we find like the Python Rubies, like Rust compilers like that, the tool chain stuff of the world, or really popular software like top 100 images on Docker Hub, for instance. But like, should we add patterns because the Go binary cataloger messed up, or should we like remove that mechanism? I feel a little biased towards not adding a classifier for these kinds of things, because otherwise, like, we just start adding dozens of classifiers for all the binaries that like the Go binary cataloger happens to not catch on correctly. But what are other folks' thoughts on this?
Yeah, the binary classifier is kind of clumsy. I wonder if, like, it'd be awesome if more people rebuilt their apps with Go 124, but there's also like the majority of binaries in the world that we find will be built before Go 124 for a long time. The binary classifiers are okay, I think. Do we get a lot of false positives from the binary classifiers? I think that's the interesting. That to me is the big disadvantage. Is like somebody
The
makes
Go one or the binary?
the
Sorry,
binary
which one?
classifier cataloger. Do we get a lot of like false positives, or like it matched like the wrong thing? I don't think we do.
Those regexes are like crafted for each binary, so which is why we tend to not have false positives for those. It's happened, but yeah, it's not that often compared to say the Go binary cataloger for this regex. So
I guess, my feeling here is that, I mean, the binary cataloger is like obviously something we would prefer to avoid, doing one-off regexes for everything. Like that's just a lot of work, not maintainable. But I mean, if there are things that we identify, like, and we just don't have any other way, I don't necessarily see a problem. I mean, generally speaking, it's not a lot of, like, adding one rule doesn't take up a lot of space in Syft. If we had a billion rules, then maybe it would. But I guess what I'm saying is, like, seems to be a fairly easy and reliable way to fix the things that are blind spots that we know about.
Yeah, I think I agree with that.
yeah, I think the other thing that's part of that too is like, well, the thing that's missing today is that we don't have any connective tissue between the binary cataloger, which uses those classifiers, and the Go binary cataloger. If there was connective tissue, that would be like, that maybe that would be a nice blessed mechanism there for correction, like what you're saying, Keith.
Chris has got his hand up.
Sorry, yeah, I just don't want to interrupt because I like the idea of the connective tissue on one hand, but on the other side, it feels like with the advent of 24 coming around, this is something that's just like no longer needed, and we either just fully invest getting a binary classifier written that can do this for something that does previous versions, or we just go with our strategy of unknown/devel for everything pre 124, and we stop trying, we just stop mixing these two parts of the pipeline of Syft across, like we stop crossing the streams, basically. Yeah, this is Keith just made a point in our chat that Mattermost is like 50 million downloads. This is a big
Probably
thing to
qualifies.
get super wrong, right? Where it's like, hey, let's stop doing the large orbital strike breadth of find any semvar at all, dial down that behavior, and just specifically try and find it within our current state.
Yeah, I think that I like that idea. I think that there should be some kind of, like, I don't know, crosstalk or code reuse or something between the binary classifiers and the Go cataloger, so that Go can say, like, hey, the main module is called Mattermost, and I have no version for it, so I'm going to invoke binary classifiers because I know, like, it can just invoke the right one. I think the problem today is that it just looks for any semvar, and so if we had a better binary classifier, we could even have like a way of labeling the binary classifiers with, like, expected Go main modules to match on or something.
Yeah, you can give them like an ecosystem tag. It's just like Go knows that you don't have to search all the binary classifiers, just the small subset that have been tagged with that.
Yeah, I think
So-
that'd be cool. Go ahead, Keith.
My thought here is like something we could do really easily today is just see if the binary that we're testing in Go matches a regex in the binary classifier. If it does, we assume that it would get picked up by that because we had to implement a special regex for it and just skip it in the Go side.
Oh, like don't even call it. Don't even do like the overlap link. Just like be like, I trust that this cataloger is going to eventually get called.
Yeah.
But won't we get different? Don't we get different metadata? Because like I think it's an interesting situation where I think that like because Go embeds metadata in their binaries, like you could get I don't know off the top of my head what the metadata looks like, but the binary classifier metadata is basically a path. Right. It's basically like we found a thing at this path and it matched this regex. It's not as like specific. So I think in an ideal world, the binary classifier, I think in an ideal world, the Go cataloger could say like I have this, github.com Mattermost server main module name and no version for it. So I'm going to go invoke this binary classifier on the file reader. But then we get the Go package metadata, which is I think nicer than the binary package metadata because we know more about what's going on. I agree, Keith, that it would be harder to build. Maybe it's worth building the easier thing. But I think it would be nice to have like in the version where like in the last fallback, we start invoking binary classifiers on the byte stream instead of just emitting a devel version or throwing up our hands or whatever.
Yeah.
We're
I mean, I guess the
approaching-
thing is,
Sorry.
the only thing I was going to say is just that like we know on the Go side we're unable to read data, so like I don't know how useful like incomplete metadata is, but I definitely agree with what you're saying. Is like there could be something that we did read that would be useful to like surface the same way as the other stuff.
Yeah,
I think the only thing we're missing is the version. Sorry, go ahead, Alex.
No, I was going to say that. Like, there's we get the compiler version, all the build flags. There's actually is a lot of extra information that we glean from like a Go build info section that would be pretty worthwhile to keep around. It really is just comes down to the version. So like if we talk about like running the binary cataloger over running like the Go binary cataloger, yeah, it does kind of make sense to like defer to the Go binary cataloger and then have that reach into the config for the binary cataloger to grab like bespoke regexes. I just or we just do this totally the other way around. Like maybe it makes sense to not even accept patterns into the binary cataloger that we know are for Go applications. Like they only go underneath the Go essentially the Go binary cataloger, so that we'd partition out our config that we have today into two things.
I wonder if we're at the point where we're saying, okay, this is really important. We're badly misidentifying a widely used image. We should go write a fix. There are a few ideas. Is it at the like someone should go make a PR, but there's a little bit of debate about what, but we can have that debate in the PR. Is that where we're at?
Yep. Just someone grab it, take it, implement one of these things, and then we'll just get it merged based on discussion on that PR.
Agreed.
Winning. When you said someone, generally we need to put a name next to someone, otherwise.
I'm a little full at the moment. Apologies.
Yeah, I We could try to put some good notes on it and put the help wanted label on it and put it in the ready column.
I was going to say,
I think that's
Noted.
probably, yeah.
Do we have any other issues? We've got 15 minutes left, and there are some topics on discourse, and there's some other issues listed in here. Are there any in particular, or should we just pick them?
up to you, MC.
Yeah, I'm out of my curated specialty list from Triage has run dry so far.
Okay, let's switch topics then. Let's go. We have a topic here that actually was brought up by Tim about an open question about whether Syft knows how to identify AI packages. No, it's an old question that we missed previously. Dan, you have some thoughts on this when we had a conversation earlier outside of this. I don't know whether this is there a like there. I know there is a tweet size answer, for what we could do now and what we might be able to do in the future. But the short answer is, it depends, I guess.
Well, yes and no. I mean, some of it comes down to what the requester means by AI packages. Like in my experience so far, like looking at developing applications with this stuff, for the most part, it's Python software, which Syft and Grype do a fine job identifying today, right? It's all facilitating various types of interactions with LLMs and embedding models and but it's software packaged in the same way that software is packaged for everything else. So that's the good news, right? In terms of cataloging and vulnerability scanning and stuff like that. And security engineer over here and I were actually looking through NVD the other day, looking for like CVEs mapped to specifically AI software. There's a ton of them, right? Which is good. That's what we wanted to verify, that this stuff wasn't just invisibly happening and nobody was looking at its vulnerability status and all that. So that stuff's really well covered. What isn't really cataloged very well are the LLM model data sets themselves, which importantly aren't software, right? They're just data. This is a blob of data. And those things, we are thinking about, having a way to specifically at least note, like we know that this thing is an LLM model, that this data, this file is an LLM model, and it has, some of the formats in that world have some metadata that can be surfaced. Other than insights, there aren't really many use cases for what you do with that information. There's no vulnerability data source that uses that kind of metadata that can be used for matching or anything like that yet. But from our perspective, that would kind of be a next step, is to specifically identify if you have 10 files and one of them is an LLM model data blob, then we'd be able to pick that up and surface it. But purely from an SBOM perspective, that's the kind of stuff we're thinking about today. The only other kind of subtlety here is that there's another pattern that's very common in this world, especially in container side, where the actual LLM model, like the data, isn't in the container at all. It has all the software in it, and the first time you use it, it goes and downloads the data at runtime. That's a very, very common model and pattern that I'm seeing in this world, which would mean no amount of scanning of the container is going to help because the actual model that's used is a dynamic property. So that's kind of the extent of my thinking on this today.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I'll paste a reply in there. And I've got it already here.
Also, like, if you're watching the stream, just a specific call to action, if you want to comment on that thread, can you talk about specifically the attributes or, I guess, fields that are part of not just like quote AI packages as they exist in like the PyPy ecosystem or as part of like are libraries that are used to build the models. But when you actually are putting together like either a GGF file, or if you're putting together something like an actual file type, like a .h5, like the HDF TensorFlow stuff that can be parsed, what if anything from there do you want to see extracted that can then be put in your SBOM that would be useful for downstream analysis or part of your like software inventory process? Because it's as new to us as it's new to everybody in the world right now. And so the usefulness slash non-usefulness of some of those fields is not as apparent as it should be if you're not using it every single day.
That's a good point. Thanks. This one I wanted to bring up because Tim's asking, well, further discussion over here. And I think they're looking for documentation about how stereoscope works, basically. And I don't know that we have, like, scooped Dan and Alex and everyone else's brains out and put them on a piece of paper anywhere in enough detail that Tim's after. Unless you know otherwise, and I don't. Is there a specification somewhere that I don't know, or I don't know how deep Tim wants to go here.
I mean, I think at the end of the day, like Stereoscope provides an interface for interrogating an OCI image, right? Which is not a format we invented or owned. But and so I think you could probably have some interest if you wanted to just go read about how OCI images work. That would probably be really, really good background reading for understanding Stereoscope. And then beyond that, and Alex can correct me if I'm wrong, there's some performance considerations like building an in-memory index so that you can quickly ask for a path in a layer, that sort of thing. But it's really an adapter between different file systems and the rest of the code, with the main file system of interest, if we're talking about layers, being OCI images.
Yeah, I mean, so this,
Sorry,
back.
the thing that I just linked the client as like the place to start exploring. But go ahead, Alex.
Well, actually, Alan, do you mind bringing back up the the previous? Yeah. So like, yeah, building on what Will said, Stereoscope is really just taking tars that represent OCI images, and that's within that has layer tars, and it's just reading across those layer tars and building a file tree. So number one, where does it decide to use the all layers versus squashed? It doesn't. So that's actually Syft. Syft really knows when to use, like how to take the file trees that are built in Stereoscope and to look at it from the right perspective. What Stereoscope is doing is it's building a file tree for every single layer. And it's building it from two perspectives. It's building what is in each layer tar, and without considering any other layer. And then it's also saying, building a file tree that's kind of acting like a stacked file system, just like what containers are, where it's saying, hey, for every previous layer in the file tree there, I'm going to keep appending on the set of files or differences. So like remove these files, add these files. And it has essentially both of those available to the caller. And the caller in this case is going to be Syft, and Syft is going to make the answer about, do I want a squashed representation or do I want all layers representation? Syft builds on this by making these things called file resolvers. And so I won't double click any further, but like the file resolvers have this concept of this all layers versus squashed, and Stereoscope just has the building blocks for it. For number two, there's very little filtering capability in Stereoscope. I'm trying to remember if I think exclude, like the -- exclude in Syft, does plumb down into Stereoscope during the indexing step. I could be wrong about that. I might be misremembering that. So there is some filtering today. There's an open PR for doing additional filtering that we're not certain if we want to accept. So that's kind of in the air. So like when it comes to these other properties like MIME type or anything else, that's like get further in the air. Like do we want to filter indexes based off of, MIME types that you find? We don't know yet.
When you say filter, do you mean like not? So if you said filter out by path, are you saying whether Syft would, whether Stereoscope would not pass that up to Syft, and so Syft would just not receive those files from, or that
Exactly.
path, anything in that path, right? Okay.
Yeah. So it's like today we kind of index everything, and I believe the exclude flag is passed down. So during the indexing step, you could say, if you run into this path, don't even bother indexing it or any children. And that saves time, which is why we decide why to plumb that down. And there's an additional PR that I think enhances that further. Well, nobody's really brought up like filtering by MIME type, but I could see that being the same kind of thing, which is like, well, it wouldn't save you time on indexing, but it might save you time on searching. That one's debatable, but so anyway, the future is there's an open PR. We don't know if we want to extend it further. And the last one, the last one's fun. So I know Tim's got an open PR that tries to enhance number 15 here. And this is one that I've like always wanted to do, and we've never quite pulled the trigger on. But the user scope and user squash scope, those are fun because it's basically saying, what has the user done above the base image that would be cataloged? We would not catalog anything in the base layer. There are things that kind of go out of the file scope. Like if I look at Stereoscope's really great at file trees and understanding things from the unit of a file, but it has no concept of package. And this is actually where we run into problems. And Tim's PR, we have a little bit of an unsolved problem for, which is, okay, if I have a single file that describes multiple packages, how do we really implement this user scope here? And this has come up before, but like the short example is an RPM database that describes all the RPMs you've installed on the system. So if you install 10 packages in your first layer, and then you install 10 more packages on your next layer, well, you're just copying that whole RPM database from layer to layer, which means as far as you're concerned, you actually, if you look at the one file in the last layer, it has 20 packages in it. It doesn't have the 10 you added. So you need to go beyond just file operations when it comes to what are the things that are in my base layer versus my, like all of the user layers. And I think Chris made some comments on these issues saying, well, one way to do this is to say catalog everything, and then you would subtract out what you found purely on the base layer. So you'd actually be doing kind of two passes, create one SBOM, create another SBOM, and do like one SBOM minus the other. And that's currently the best way we've been able to imagine to do that. Oh,
Go ahead,
Chris.
You could, so that's at the Syft layer, but you could even like think about going down to the Stereoscope layer where the indexing and like kind of index separation happens. And you could, before Syft even gets a stab at it, right? You could say, what comprises of all the indexes like above this one level, and just send that up as the answer to Syft. But that requires a lot more refactoring, a lot more effort on the Stereoscope side. And we already wanted to do the SBOM diffing and kind of like subtractive take a negative of something. So that's why it was proposed up here rather than down when we're doing the initial, like, I think it's like the directory provider. After the thing gets untarred, you can start separating out what you want to send up as part of that OCI image object that kind of comes out of Stereoscope. So that would be another place you could do it.
Yeah. So that also solves an interesting question, which is identifying what is meant by base layer. I think when people are asking for this, they mean like I did from Ubuntu latest, and then I installed a bunch of stuff and copied in a bunch of scripts that I wrote, and I want an SBOM of the stuff that's in my image that's not in Ubuntu. Like that's what they really mean. And the problem is that Ubuntu latest is just a string that points to a set of layers in Docker Hub. And that doesn't mean like that's not written down. So if you scroll down, I've got an answer down on this issue where we take this Red Hat has published this wonderful universal base image micro 9, which has like 87 layers or something. I don't know. It's like not a very big file, but it's got
now, isn't it?
right now, yeah. I think some people are using Nix to build images too, and you end up with like sort of every file in its own layer or every dependency in its own layer, which is its own kind of special process. But so if you look at this tar, like what the info stereoscope is going to get is we get all of these layers, right? All of these blobs are like snapshots of the file system diff, and we're trying to guess which ones the user cares about. But the answer is not in there, right? Like the image file doesn't know which one you think of as your from line, right? The from line can bring in n layers, and then the user can add n layers. And so the approach Chris was talking about, where like one of the things you could do is if we built an SBOM diff command in Syft, is you could literally do Syft Ubuntu latest, Syft my image, like Syft subtract SBOM from my image, SBOM from Ubuntu latest, and then and that would probably give you the answer you wanted. I think it's yeah, I think that might be a lot of work. I think that's probably how we would have to do it, because it's harder to do a reverse lookup, right? It's easy to ask a registry like, is the tag Ubuntu latest associated with some digest of a layer or a set of layers? It's hard to ask, I have a set of layers, who has tagged it with what? It's sort of a one-way map, so it's hard to do.
Right, and I don't think there's a way to even know the from line, like
Right,
to know
right.
what is the base image. So, and because there is a nice way to ask like both the Docker daemon and the registry, like here's the set of layers and digest for each of those layers, and like, but we just don't know without the user saying, oh, and by the way, here's the from line for you to figure out the thing to compare with.
Right. And we could imagine something like if somebody wants to like do a Docker image inspect and look up an image digest, and then do a Syft -- only like squashed on and give us a digest, and only think about things that were added below that. But that still doesn't solve the RPMDB file, right? Where like a package manifest keeps getting changed in different layers. That's a much harder problem, because the layers know about files, but they don't know about packages. So then you end up running Syft on every layer and keeping track of what changed, which is prohibitively performance intensive. So anyway, that's why we didn't build it yet.
Plus the fact that stereoscopy is like a core part of this thing, and it would be quite invasive to make these kind of changes, right? I shouldn't have asked another question. It's already 3 minutes past. I'm sorry.
Oh dear, I
apologize.
Run down the clock. Yeah.
Leave that as a cliffhanger for next week, where you can either educate me or tell me I'm right or wrong. Sorry for keeping you a little bit later. Thank you for answering those questions and all the other things we brought up. And thank you for everyone for joining, and those who contributed PRs and to the conversations. We really appreciate you doing that. So thank you. And we'll be back next week with another one of these. You'll find everything on GitHub. Links to everything we've talked about is in the chat, and you'll also find them linked on Discourse as well. I hope everyone has a good weekend. You guys all get Monday off, so it'll be very quiet here. Enjoy Monday. That's going to be fun. And I'll see you next week. Cheerio, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Bye.
Bye
Thanks so much.
bye.
Care.
Bye.
See you, folks.